Things appear to be going from bad to worse for the state's Workforce Solutions Department. The former Secretary Bill McCamley stepped down suddenly in April and now says it was in part because of harassment he faced personally from folks frustrated with the processing of their unemployment claims in the midst of a global pandemic. And the Legislative Finance Committee issued a report that found the state may have overpaid on unemployment claims to the tune of $250 million. Nearly half of that, according to the LFC, might in fact be fraudulent. Now, Senator Snyder, the governor has said in a statement that those numbers are actually much lower. But either way, this has turned into a financial mess for the state, no doubt. Given the unprecedented nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, is it any surprise that there would be problems? Let's just sort of start there. Were you shocked when you first heard the story?
Well, that level of money always is shocking to me, but that there were problems, no, it isn't. And I certainly don't think it's unique to New Mexico. I haven't done any study or research on other states, but when you have that kind of, and I believe it was rapid change in the number of applicants. First of all, you're short-staffed. You have to find staff to hire to handle things. I believe it was going from 14,000 phone calls up to 200,000 phone calls.
Well, the number went from 7,500 a month to 75,000 a day. 75,000 calls a day. That's amazing. Who could handle that?
And nobody can. And certainly nobody ever dreamed that we would have to. So, and we're also facing the fact that we were loaned money to cover some of our initial expenses. So that's in addition to the 200,000. And I don't know whose figures are right, the studies or the governor's. The thing is, we still have a problem, and we still have unemployed people that we have to honor our commitment to them for unemployment. So I'm not surprised that we have a problem. I'm just waiting to see really and truly how severe a problem it is, because the money has to be found someplace.
That's a good point there. And I want to ask Serge, you just made an interesting point on the level of money in that loan. The LFC has a concern of a $278 million loan from the federal government to shore up the state's unemployment insurance fund. And the state has received $1.75 billion in American Rescue Act funds, and it appears that at least some of that money will go back to paying that loan I just mentioned. But the big question is, how do we get this back under control from here, Tom Garrity, given we have an interim secretary in Ricky Serna who's been around, he's doing the best he can, but holy smokes, he's got an uphill climb here.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, there was a lot of fraud, which, you know, I think is the main culprit, you know, for the major overpayments. I mean, there's also fraud with the PPP program.
Right.
So, you know, the surprise, you know, we shouldn't be shocked, but maybe we should be surprised with just how massive this issue is. You know, I had a personal connection with the fraud issue, because back in October of last year, my identity was stolen, and it was used to actually leverage unemployment benefits for someone. And so, you know, I had a chance to work that both from the employer side as well as the employee side, knowing that, you know, the state of Mexico is just simply overloaded. And, you know, the level of anxiety that it provides to, you know, anyone, and knowing that I'm not alone now, it was really something else. So, you know, it has since been resolved, but wow, it took about 6 to 7 months to get it all kind of, you know, put into place. So hopefully New Mexicans will get answers, you know, to not just, you know, what's next for employers as far as, you know, are our contributions to this fund going to continue to increase to make up for that shortfall, or, you know, will we be provided grace? You know, there's still a lot of questions around this, not the least of which is how did the fraud occur?
That's a good point there. In 6 to 7 months, I thought you were going to say 6 to 7 days when you started to get into that sentence. Oh, man. Hey, Serge, you know, the governor has been pretty quiet on this issue. You know, she's issued some statements, but so far, she's not really done an in-depth interview that I've seen on this situation. Does she need to get in front of the public to answer some of these questions? I mean, we're talking a classic buck stops here kind of moment.
I mean, I think not only is it a good opportunity to sort of say, yeah, the buck stops here, I honestly think this LFC report to me is a bit of a hit job. I think DWS did this exactly right. We're talking about billions of dollars coming through, a non-zero amount of fraud. But if you do the math, if I've done it correctly, it's, in the neighborhood of 3 or 4% of this money in a pandemic with a huge amount of, new claims coming in, when the primary thing we're worried about is making sure that New Mexicans are taken care of, that we are, doing the math or the calculus right of saying, are we going to make it the barriers to getting this and making sure we're accurate so insurmountable that we underserve the people of New Mexico? Or are we going to say, let's get this money out? And is there an acceptable, I don't know what the right number is, but to me, is 3% slippage, right, an acceptable level of misallocation and misappropriation when we're talking about the tens of thousands of New Mexicans who are receiving this and helping this? I vote yes every single day. To me, this is a no-brainer. I don't understand, this is, sure, let's look at it, let's try to figure out. But we have seen here and all over the place, right? In housing, one of my favorite things to talk about, one of the biggest problems with getting rent to people has been the documentation, the getting of all the right pieces of paper to everybody, and less money is going out the door. I think DWS made the right call on this, and I support that. I think this is a moment to say, yes, this happened, and this is why, and we prioritize New Mexicans over, trying to,
I think I know what you're trying to say there. Absolutely. I hear your point loud and clear. But Senator, in the meantime, we've got an 8.2% unemployment rate here in New Mexico. And, there's obviously work to be done, and we don't know what percentage is looking for a job. And by the way, that puts us tied with New York for the third highest unemployment rate in the country, just for perspective there. Is that news just going to exacerbate the problems we're having with fraudulent claims that we're talking about right now?
I don't think the fact that New York and New Mexico are tied is going to exacerbate it. I think the fact that New Mexicans who are unemployed see these millions, even billions of dollars coming into our state, and they can't get a phone call answered, they can't get an email answered, they can't get any response about their claim. I think, and I went in and I've looked at all these things, there's some questions that you don't know whether they're asking this or they're asking that. And I think that they will find, and maybe I'm being naive, I don't know, but I think they'll find that some of the fraud is because people simply didn't know which answer to choose, which they didn't fit in either box completely. So I think we'll find some of that. But I think the main thing is, and we've not really talked about this, is that some people are in New Mexico are actually earning more through the unemployment than they were as an employee. Well, I tried to think of what categories that would be, and and here again, it could be wrong, but I can only think of like the hospitality industry. And when you have, as most people know, there's a lower wage paid for wait staff, for instance, and they depend on their tips. Well, is there evaluation by the Department of Labor? Do they look at what they were actually paid hourly, that lower rate?
That's right.
Or do they count in any? And if you start looking at, and if you're having to read, a lot of people right now have finished out their first round.
Let me do this, Senator. I appreciate that your point there. I want to ask Tom to kind of wrap it up here, but under a minute here. Dovetailing off what the Senator is describing here, Tom, I'm curious about perception and how this all works for the general citizenry and our trust in government, our trust in how we do our business. What's the perception bounce here from this story?
Yeah, well, for Department of Workforce Solutions, unfortunately, they're reinforcing a negative. Trust in state and federal government has been on the decline for the last 8 years.
Right.
And, so these types of missteps by government will not do anything to rebuild it very quickly unless they increase really the frontline personnel and the communications. That's the big question mark right now is, people try and call the 800 number or the toll-free number of the call center. and they just say that they get a message saying that, you know what, all lines are busy.
Right.
I know this because I've called it. And so what you want to be able to do is, make sure that everybody has a chance to, get on that call waiting list, to be placed on hold, even if it's a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of customer service items that government can do and implement to really rebuild, or at least to, kind of balance out that trust so they can start to build it back up again.
Well, interesting point there, and that's going to have to come with a new head of the department. They haven't had a PIO for over a year. Like the whole thing, this could be an opportunity to just revamp the whole deal. Thanks to the entire panel for taking the time to research and discuss this important topic. We're back in a bit with more debate, this time around taxpayers potentially footing the bill for cleaning up after the oil and gas industry.